Welcome into the show. We're live, CT with EJ. The streets are buzzing. We're joined by the one, the only Coach Nick of BBallbreakdown, the best in the biz at breaking it down. It's NBA free agency. Day 4. There's been a lot happen, but the biggest moves are yet to come. We're looking forward to chopping it up. Welcome in to the best chat. Like, subscribe to the channel, and I can't wait to have this conversation. EJ, Coach, how are we feeling?
I'm doing well. I played basketball. I played 2-on-2 this morning for the first time in I don't know how long, and it was fun.
Nice.
Are we going to get a breakdown of Coach Nick's game today?
Well, by the way, I haven't played for a long time, my body, the whole thing, but I have this notion that I've been training some kids. I kind of feel pretty good out there, and I'm like, maybe I do really try and get back into shape and really try and get back on the court and play, and then maybe I would film all of that and kind of do an update across weeks. Either would be horribly embarrassing, or it might be something really interesting. I don't know.
Love it. Thanks for coming by, Coach Nick. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yep. Glad to have you on. And yeah, everyone that hasn't been following, like, subscribe to BBallbreakdown channel. Always been doing amazing work, but I love the live streams you've been doing also since after the playoffs and recently breaking down free agency. It's been eventful. Before we just dabble in a little bit of Knicks, what's really stood out to you so far?
Well, it was funny. On my show, we were talking about the Lakers and what they did. They did a lot of things, and so it just felt like they did a nice job sort of filling in and covering for what they needed. I swear I had seen on Twitter, when Twitter was not working or whatever we call that the other day, that like the Spurs had offered him $100 million for 4 years, and then that was going to be a real problem with the Lakers, but it didn't happen, I guess, and so they were able to get him on a great deal. So all their other signings too, I thought were great in terms of the value they got from that, and so I like what they did. And the biggest thing that they'd have to do as far as managing stuff is they can't play LeBron 34 minutes, 35 minutes a game. He has to get down to 31, 32. AD, no more than that either. If they can't win and be in the top 4 in the West with those guys playing those minutes, then they're really going to have a problem, and it wouldn't matter per se. But I like what they did a lot.
EJ.
That brings us to our team, our local team, the team that we love the most. Obviously, you think that the Lakers were winners. What do you think about the Knicks moves this offseason, this free agency?
They're trying to get all the college guys back together again, huh? That's sort of what it feels like. We have Hart, Brunson, and they just got DiVincenzo together. So that's interesting, right? In terms of skill level coming out of their program, it's always been a really great place to build that out and have people are going to be able to play really well from Villanova. So that's interesting. I think the Obi Toppin stuff, it's just frustrating because I think we've talked about this before. Obi Toppin is good and has been good when he plays. So why didn't he play more? Do we ever get down to the bottom of that and explain that better?
No. I mean, this has been the question. This has been the paradox. A number 8 pick, a fan favorite by and large. The closest we got to an answer was what came out, I think, about 2 weeks ago, the leaked audio tape. But there's never been a definitive answer as to what didn't work between Coach Thibodeau, the front office, and Obi Toppin. And so this is really going to be something that they might even do a 30 for 30 at some point, the Obi Toppin, a couple of years in New York City.
Yeah,
speaking of quickly, the Lakers, they signed Cam Reddish, who was another guy that the Knicks traded for and never got run.
Clutch,
really.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, maybe he isn't as good as I think he is, but I don't know. I think he deserved, we deserve to find out a little bit more. So weird stuff on that end. But at the very least, DiVincenzo's got a ring. He knows how to win. He's good. Who is he replacing at this point?
So he's going to replace probably Obi, likely, and they're going to go small, Coach. The Knicks' backup power forward is Isaiah Roby, who hasn't even played a single minute, really, with the Knicks. He was picked up late last season. So with RJ Barrett, who I kind of like the fact that he might play a lot more 4 off the bench, but Josh Hart Tom Thibodeau loves that. He's a solid rebounder, but obviously gives up a lot of size.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like there's, I'm all for competing in heart, literally heart, and then, I don't know. They're not going to be able to run long stretches of DiVincenzo at the four. That's just going to be, he can make a defensive play every now and then, but when he's that outsized, I don't see how that's going to be great in the East. But I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Well, EJ and coach, he's probably going to play Randall like he does. Randall plays 38 minutes, at minimum. So there's not a lot of backup power forward minutes to go all around. What do you think?
That's the concerning thing. I think that this was in part a move to really solidify Coach Thibodeau's rotation minutes. Part of the issue, going back to your previous question, Coach, was why didn't Obi get a lot of burn? Well, part of the issue is that Julius was playing so many minutes. Mm-hmm. But I think part of the issue that we're going to see is that this might actually set the Knicks up for failure, because what if something does happen to Julius Randle? We had the expectation that he could play minutes upon minutes upon minutes, and then what happened towards the end of last season? Well, he sustained an injury. So this is going to be a real interesting equation in terms of Knicks minutes and rotational minutes for that mysterious backup number 4.
My thoughts on Randall anyway, right? I've been talking to you guys for at least 2 seasons about this, right?
Yeah.
He was the guy. We should have heard the announcement of a trade that they traded him. I still feel like now it actually was better this year. I felt like there's some things kind of maybe got ironed out a little bit, but I still feel like this is the most value they're ever going to get for him, and I don't think they're going to get to the next level with him playing 36 minutes for them and being such a focus. Even though it's not like I hate his game, but I just feel like there's a ceiling there, and I've been saying this for a long time. But I guess the interesting question is, let's pretend we were in the front office and we wanted to entertain, a deal for Randall. What will we get back for him?
See, that's the $1 million question. But Coach, you probably know the connections with the front office and his agent. Leon Rose was, head of CAA basketball. Aaron Mintz represents Julius, but I think all the beat reporters did mention after the first season they did put Randall on the block, but he just had a bad season. But then you're right. After he had that bounce back year, they drafted Obi. They should have kind of looked at it then, but then it just became too late. Randall just started to play too well. But his value around the league doesn't seem to be what it is with the New York Knicks front office. It's a case of we see what he does, and the accolades are there. He's a 2-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. I think the point guard play with Brunson was the number one reason why we saw a much better Randall this year. Yeah. Less usage. Yeah. I think. Yeah. What do you think, EJ?
I think Julius Randle's one of those players where he is right now. We're not talking about where he was 2019, 2020, but the Julius Randle of 2022, 2023, or even 23 into 24, he's one of those players whose market, if you try to trade him, could you get a better player in terms of trading him? Or will you be trading him for, let's say, 80% of his value or 90% of his value, or of our perceived value of Julius Randle? And I think it's really the latter. It's what we perceive him to be, like you were saying, CT, versus what the rest of the league values him. Like, for example, is he the piece that would be traded for? And again, please understand, I'm not saying I want this to happen, but hypothetically, would he be involved in a Dame trade? Would he be involved in a Paul George trade? Is he a player of that ilk, or are you trading him more for lesser parts that you combined to equal what Julius Randle is? And I think that he's one of those weird players where you're not going to get more for him. You're going to get less for him.
Now, that is probably true, and that usually happens with anybody who's in the all-star level when you're trading away. But, could you get, 75 or 80% of the production that he gives you for 50% of the cost? Because if you do that, and maybe someone who isn't as volatile, or maybe doesn't have the cloud over his head a lot of time and starts to get angry and pout and all that kind of stuff, maybe that you find some things, especially at the power forward position. What makes him valuable as like the stretch four is when he shoots threes at 40%, which he did that 1 year, right? He shot really well. But he's going to take over 3 a game. He's going to shoot, below 35%. Like that's another issue where you have to wonder, did he get to that level by taking more ill-advised threes, right? That's the most he's taken. The other thing about the usage rate, now I know that Brunson only played 68 games, but I'm trying to quickly look at it when he was with Brunson on the court. But Randall had a career high in usage rate last year at 29.5. So it wasn't like it went down with Brunson there, which is interesting.
With Randall's contract, though, Coach, it's we've seen contracts go up. Bruce Brown's earning basically what Jalen Brunson's earning and close to what Julius Randle is earning. His contract is very good, but with that said, ideally the Knicks are going big star hunting, and Randall should really become the third option. So, do you not think we could still win? Let's say we did bring in a bona fide number one, or the Knicks did swing that trade for Paul George, and Randall's usage is reduced? Or do you think he's just going to have a hard time, not holding up the offense, and that it's just his play style?
Wait, I missed the rumors about Paul George for the Knicks. Is that a thing that I missed? Is that happening?
That was bandied about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they've had discussions.
That they had discussions, that the Knicks considered it, and there was division in the front office as to whether or not it was a feasible trade.
Right, because like if who are the Knicks gonna give back? Were there details?
It will be Barrett and quickly maybe in picks. Randall wasn't going to go in that trade. Him and Paul George are good friends as well. So yeah,
and there was the extension piece of it as well too was part of the concern.
No, I like that because I would almost think that if it worked. And he did, like Paul George comes in and takes a lot of that usage rate and then knocks him down a little bit. In theory, they'd win. And, winning hides a lot of that issue, right? And so I would imagine that Randall would be able to handle that because they would be winning more. I would imagine he'd be a little bit more efficient, which is also good. I wonder what the relationship is like with Tibbs and the players themselves. For some reason, I feel like I like Tibbs. He's been nice to me whenever, and I shouldn't have any like animosity toward him. I just always just scratch my head because there just never seems to be enough sort of encouragement from him, and it seems like the players would respond well to that if he could. And so as a result, there might be certain players who bristle against the constant bellowing and the constant overcoaching in a way that like would Randall ever be able to kind of find a happy place in that setting?
So yeah, before I kick it to EJ, you're really going down a path where you're spot on. So with Thibodeau, they're making an effort to get guys that, like you said, are either Villanova connected and they really want to be in the situation, or they're CAA connected, they really want to be in the situation. It's a very niche, rigid kind of group of guys that are Tibbs guys, and Cam Reddish was extradited and and so forth. So yeah, we really are like, I mean, a lot of the fan base is like, why don't we look outside that circle? But yeah, you brought up a great point, EJ, with Tibbs, and why we are seeing dudes that are connected in a certain way that can handle the Tom Thibodeau kind of environment, and New York as well. That's
New York. That's the other piece. Yeah, the New York piece is so big. We've seen it over and over again. We've seen it in different sports. And the other piece too, like what makes Julius so complicated to understand is that when you look at the history of players that surrounded him throughout his tenure as a New York Knick, one of the things we found is that there's always been, to some extent, a level of mishmash pieces that have surrounded him. Whether it was Alfred Payton, I can't believe I'm actually saying that. These are good times, and we're no longer talking about, sorry, Mr. Payton, if you're watching. But to have Jalen Brunson being our starting point guard. But we went from Evan Fournier, and here's another piece that we've not really discussed, but the pairing with RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, from my untrained eyes, it's always looked like a wonky kind of, this is not the best pairing of Jenga pieces. So this kind of diminishes it limits what RJ is. It also in some ways limits what Julius can be. So in fairness, I think that's something that we have to use as a metric by which to analyze Julius's tenure here. What are your thoughts about that, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, another thing is, Barrett is a guy that's sort of, I had a lot of high hopes for coming in to his rookie year and through his rookie year, and felt like there would be some really good growth. And there's just issues like the 3-point shooting, the rhythm, and it's mechanical stuff that they could be fixed, I suppose, with the right kind of training. To help him get more. You can't be 31% on that. What was he? How many did he take? He was averaging, over 5 a game. But even worse, I thought, was the finishing around the basket. I got to look at, right now his 2-point percentage is below 50%, which is not great. I bet you it was also suboptimal around the rim. That's my impression of watching enough of those clips and his finishing. So as a result, it's like I wonder if he could be the fourth guy on a really good team that gets to the conference finals. I kind of feel like no. So if we're talking about Randall being a third on a championship team, yeah. But then again, if it's Barrett as the fourth guy, that's also problematic. And certainly as a third guy, I don't see him even getting as far as the conference finals because, again, listen, it was a great first round win for them over the Cleveland Cavaliers. In a way that was very surprising. There is a ability for them to play at a different level, but then we saw what happens. When you go up against Spoelstra. And that changed a lot of things and exposed a lot of things. And I've always looked at that prism. Like, if you want to win, 50 games, great. That's nice. I'm always thinking that teams are looking into this for the prism of, can they get to the finals? Can they win the finals? And that's the problem. I think the players they have now, they're not there, right? Would this team, do you think, get past, Miami into the conference finals now?
So that's a great question.
That's a really good question.
I didn't watch a lot of Golden State, Coach, and I know you're on the West Coast, but DiVincenzo was a guy with a skill set that the Knicks needed in that Miami series. A guy who could shoot. He has a pretty deep range. He can defend. We were without Manuel Quickley for the last 3 games, game 4, 5, and 6. So we really missed Emmanuel Quickley's scoring off the bench. We are a little small now. Definitely got to acknowledge that. But RJ Barrett is streaky. But to your earlier point, I think RJ Barrett's the likely one outgoing. I don't think he's going to be a fourth option on a contender with the Knicks because he's probably going to make way to help us get the number 1 option. Otherwise, there's no other salary we can really trade for. Donovan Mitchell continues to talk about wanting to be in New York. So.
Oh, interesting. Wait, when he says that, who does he mean? The Nets?
No, I mean the Knicks are his preferred option. That hasn't changed.
Oh, Donovan Mitchell. I thought you said there's only one team to beat in New York. Oh, that you mean? Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Yes. All that stuff is right. And as far as DiVincenzo, I mean, he's listed at 6'4". So, he's probably 6'4" in shoes. And so, him playing with small ball 4, it just doesn't, small ball 4s need to be 6'6", 6'7", I would think. But nonetheless, you're right. And by the way, the best part of his game, I thought that really matured, was the shooting off a dribble and running pick and roll. He's actually really good at that. And it's always nice to have that when you have to swing it after the first, initial action to another player who then can handle the ball and who can shoot and create stuff. It's really important in this league for sure. And people are looking for that third guy, right? It's not good enough to have the second guy who can swing it to and then whatever. Yeah. He might be able to break some things down, get cut off, and then it's a third guy with about 8 or 9 seconds in the shot clock. What are you going to do? Well, that's a good thing for DiVincenzo, certainly, because like Josh Hart is not going to shoot very well from the outside generally with his form. Did he shoot well at the Knicks at the end when he was there for the last whatever? It's worth checking. I feel like maybe he did. Am I off?
Josh Hart.
Yeah, Josh Hart. Yeah,
kind of struggled in the Miami series, especially towards the latter half.
But now I'm remembering in the 25 games he shot 52% from 3 on very low volume. I remember that now because everyone was freaking out, like, how is this possible? Because he had never been very high at all in his career, right? Like, that was crazy. And he won't do that again. I think the playoffs were really, he came down to earth in a hard way. Let's see here. Hart ended up shooting, 31%. So I'm assuming that, he'll be in that 31, 32, 33%. But obviously DiVincenzo is a guy who's really going to spread the floor. So that's good for them. Remember, Fournier is still on the roster, right? Or they're going to move?
Yeah, he's still on the roster at this point. And that's what we were saying before about like there being just certain pieces that just seem to not make or congeal into something that's cohesive. Starting unit, I mean, we have a 1 through 9, but is it the 1 through 9 that'll emerge into the start of the season? We don't know. There's also the piece with regards to Mitchell Robinson. Will he have some sort of, I mean, I'm going to use the word evolution, but that's the wrong word. Will he have some sort of offensive game? Because that's another piece of it. I think the Julius usage rate is a reflection of having a starting 5 who hasn't presented much of an offensive game. So this is why this team is so complicated we love the team, but understanding what are the pieces or what are the moves that have to take place to move it into championship to being a contender. And even answering your previous question, which we haven't answered, is this a team that could beat Miami? And I want to shout out Dermot O'Sullivan, who said that Miami lost some pieces, but nevertheless, it's really hard to figure out what this Knicks roster is going to be in terms of efficiency, scoring capability. We know that Tibbs seems to have a somewhat antiquated philosophy when it comes to offense, or at least with the pieces that he has in place. So, Coach, I can't even answer your question. Could this roster beat a Miami, even a Miami that's not the same team this upcoming season?
Exactly right, and it's not necessarily the Miami team we see now. It's like Miami, like that second round opponent who is going to be very well prepared, very tough. Certainly zone could be a problem with them if they can't get enough shooting around to attack that. I'm kind of curious right now in terms of passing, because you're talking about antiquated, offensive, attack from the Knicks and from Tibbs. The Knicks were ranked, it looks like maybe 20th in passes per game at 273, 273 and a half in the regular season. And then I kind of want to look at that. Did it change? And then they went to 240 in the playoffs. So I would imagine everybody passed a little bit less maybe in the playoffs. Things kind of ground down to a halt a little bit, but that's not good in my mind. I know that sometimes passing in certain teams, you don't need to have a lot of passing to do well and have a high offensive rating, yada yada. But I think it does speak to sort of a lot of extra work that Brunson needs to do all that amazing stuff that he does. And it would be nice if it could be a little easier for him, right? And that goes. And how does it get easier? For players, movement, side to side, opening the court a little bit, even a little bit more would really help. So I'd hope that'd be more of a focus for them. And you have to worry about just it's tiring the guy out. He's the best post-up player in the league at 6 feet. Brunson is. I would argue. Right, footwork wise,
yep.
and yet that's so much work for him to get those off. It's like he's got to. It must have an effect after 35 minutes a game through a whole regular season. And I'm forgetting now. Forgive me. What were his injuries that kept him out of so many games?
There's definitely an ankle. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He rolled it. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was an ankle roll, and he just it was at the wrong end of the season, and it was just a innocuous roll, but.
Oh yeah.
I guess with the isolation-heavy offense coach, that's another question we could ponder. Could Julius Randle accept a role where he's getting a lot less touches? We were the biggest isolation offense, and he's a very difficult shot maker in the playoffs. That becomes twice as hard. But the Knicks, made the Elite Eight, and I think we haven't really gotten any worse. Whether you could argue how much better did we get with DiVincenzo, we lost Obi, another year of some younger players improving. I think we're about where we are. I could expect the Knicks to, vie for that 4th seed, at worst, and and try to get home court again. But it's all eyes on the next move, because Fournier's salary with Quickly, with Barrett can form a package. They have all their first round picks. What's going to happen with the Sixers? The Heat maybe got worse. They might get better, but what's going to happen with Philly? Because it looks like James Harden is most definitely out of there, and whatever they get back, is that going to be enough value to continue to help Joel Embiid win?
Oh, well, it's funny because my podcast partner Combo had a really good tweet today saying that the request by Harden for the trade will lead to Embiid wanting to leave as well. And I was thinking about that because it kind of started when Harden requested the trade, and then Kevin Durant requested the trade. Really like Kyrie when they were all in Brooklyn. It all seems to create a cascade of events, and probably in other places too. So he's not wrong on that. And I think that with Philly, and people are already leaving. They lost a couple other players that they're going to need to figure out how to replace. And
Tobias.
that's a tough one because they're not going to get the value back unless they can make a trade for Dame, for instance, which I kind of always felt would be really maybe a good fit. Dame alongside Embiid. By the way, you know where I think Dame should go?
Where's that?
To Milwaukee.
Okay.
I
was saying
now,
the Clippers.
Be able to keep Drew Holiday because he's such a good defensive player and they need him in the backcourt, but they probably would need to include him. But I've always felt like, that Giannis needs a guy like Dame next to him. That would really, be the best version for him in a way that Harden probably should have gone there instead of Brooklyn when he had the chance several seasons ago. That made sense to me as well. That a really strong ball dominant playmaking guard alongside them because they have to rely on Chris Middleton, who they re-signed, smartly. To do so much of that. And Chris Middleton has been pretty good at it, but that's not really, his best suit either to have to run the pick and rolls in crunch time and, be that guy. So that's why Dame would be a perfect fit there.
Yeah, I was saying this to EJ, coach, off air, but I think a wacky trade, and I don't know why it's not talked about enough, but Dame is from Cali. So why isn't there any momentum towards the Clippers trying to, I think Dame to the Clippers could fit well. Paul George goes to Philly to help out Embiid, and maybe James Harden goes to Miami, who needs two good defenders, Bam and Jimmy, and then they all send assets to Portland.
Yeah.
What do you think about that crazy scenario? It would be the biggest 4-team deal.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the Clippers probably don't want to part with Paul George without another star coming back because I don't think Kawhi is going to be playing much anymore, right? I just don't know if he's ever going to be able to be Kawhi again. And so if that's the case and they put these under contract, yada, yada, then, you need Paul George, right? Like how else are we going to make that happen unless you got, Harden back or someone like that. So that is tough to me. I thought you were going to say he should go to the Warriors. So that's where he's really from pretty much, close there.
Yeah.
Now, the Warriors, it makes me wonder, could they have pulled off a trade to get Dame instead of CP3? Because CP3 is, he's probably washed, right? Like he's not going to be able to play. And so I talked myself into it, thinking, okay, great, he'll play the pool role. They'll keep him in 22 minutes a game, so they can finally get him through a whole season without getting hurt and be fresh. But they're talking about starting him, and I got to tell you, whoever came up, and I don't know if that's even the front office or the coaching staff or whatever. If anybody in the coaching staff had said, "Oh, we're going to start Steph, Clay, CP3, Wiggins, and Draymond," that's not I don't see how that's a starting five that's optimal for them at all.
I actually have a question for you, Coach, about that as well. You got the wheels turning here. Which trade or which move do you think that particular organization will most regret? Will it be Golden State and the CP3 trade, or will it be the Bradley Beal trade to Phoenix?
Ooh, wow, that's a great question. I think the Beal thing could work. I did a video on that. Feel free to check it out if you like. And I think that there's a lot of redundancies there, right? It's weird. But like I said before, there's such a value now to, the teams are defensively loading up so much to the stars and really just forcing them to have to pass it. So let me take a quick detour because the James Harden stuff, everybody wants to, yell at him for the Game 6 and Game 7 no-shows where he didn't take a lot of shots, didn't score a lot. I went through every possession he was on for both defense and offense, and you realize that so many times he'd run a pick and roll, and there's a third defender just standing there 10 seconds before that waiting for him. So he made the right pass every time, and they would brick it every time. They could not do anything with that pass he gave them as an opening. So imagine, if it's Booker and, running a pick and roll with Ayton, and they load up and they stop, and he kicks it to Beal. Well, Beal is now going to be able to have a closeout to attack and create in that mid-range like Booker would do. They certainly have similar games where they don't have to change the offense at all, although we have a new coach anyway. But so to me, it feels like they could make that work. And you know what? Beal defensively probably and might actually get a little more credit than he has in the past. I think that there's an opportunity here where lower usage percentage on the offensive end could result in him actually having a little bit more energy in the defensive end and keeping guys in front a little bit better. So look for that. And as a result, and I'm kind of convinced that CP3 will probably end up being, they can't play him, starters minutes, and so
got to keep him fresh.
If he can't play 68, 70 games, then it's going to be that's the trade you're going to look at and be like, this was not worth it.
Yeah, they're trying to maximize a very, very late chapter of their window, I feel like, with Curry, with Clay. But in terms of the Knicks, it does seem like Coach Joel Embiid, with his connections also, Leon Rose used to be his agent, but he seems to be the number one goal for the Knicks, whatever happens in Philly. But another big man who I don't think is going to stay for very long in Minnesota, if the Knicks could get Karl Anthony Towns, let's say for a very decent or cheaper price, like the Bradley Beal thing, salary, cap space, and things like that, would you be someone who would, as a coach, would prefer a guy like Mitchell Robinson, who you're getting, on a cheaper contract, you're getting a sure thing with offensive rebounding, toughness, defense, or a guy like Cat, who on his day can be electric offensively, but may not be a Tom Thibodeau kind of fit?
That's a really, really, really good question.
Bear in mind, his contract's ridiculous in 2 years.
It is? Wait, remind me what it is.
It's 40, 50, 60, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, how would they? I'm not even sure how they would even do that, right? Make that kind of play, right, to get him. But listen, Karl Anthony Towns, at his best when he's playing the 5, causes a lot of problems, and we saw that. Now, is he mentally tough enough to get past that? It seems to be a label that people have been putting on him. Perhaps he's giving us reasons to believe that label, in some respects. But if you're gonna, I think the thing with Mitchell Robinson is they'll talk a lot about vertical spacing. They talk about lobs, and that kind of thing. It's really important in today's NBA. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I might even do a video about this. Do you know how many lobs are thrown in a game? Typically, it's
3.
You know what I mean? It's is it really a thing? Now is the threat a thing? Maybe another 3, another 5. I don't know. That said, maybe it should be more of. I did a thing on Marcus Smart, by the way, because we were talking about the trade there and how the Celtics finally just got tired of it. But his lob passing was not good. He'd throw the ball away so often. And I made a point saying that not a lot of people throw lobs because they are tough. You got to get everything right and timed right and accuracy and all that stuff. And so as a result, just what value are we getting from Mitchell Robinson offensively? Listen, I get it. The defensive stuff is great. But then again, would Karl Anthony Towns be able to thrive alongside Randall, for instance? That's an interesting debate there. I don't know. They'd be kind of battling. They'd probably run into each other a lot, in terms of wanting certain spots. But I like Towns, and I think that that would probably give them an advantage that other teams don't get from the 5 position, without question. That's what Towns does for you. And of course, they make a trade and they bring Rudy Gobert in, and now they kind of destroyed what they were on the way to building, right? And they might never get back to where they are, even if Anthony Edwards ascends, like we've been saying he's going to. So anyway, so the point being that I would probably take Karl Anthony Towns and maybe without Randall. I like Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. That seems really great to me, working together. Maybe I could even talk myself into RJ Barrett in that kind of mix too, a little bit. But then, obviously DiVincenzo and Hart, alongside would probably end up getting some of those minutes. To me, it's like RJ Barrett ultimately he could be a starter, but then doesn't get the minutes in crunch time, which I think was playing out right last year. Isn't that what was happening?
Oh yeah, there was a stretch, particularly towards the end of the season, where RJ was finding his way on that bench and just glued to it for stretches. And there was a redemption in part during the playoffs. But it's what CT mentioned before. It's the up and down. It's the inconsistency with RJ.
I remember now. Yes, there were. It wasn't like there were. It wasn't. Can we call it a redemption, or can we just say there was a couple blips there where he actually came alive? Right.
Yeah.
Overall playoffs, it wasn't great. But yes, I remember a couple times where this could be it, But you're right. It's and it's tough. It's very difficult. I don't want to say it's easy for anybody in the playoffs to suddenly come alive and find that and sustain it. That's where are they worth it? Are they worth the money you want to pay him? Because maybe you can help me figure this out. Because the whole thing with the Harden stuff is he wants a trade. He wants max money, right? Some version of max money. It's sort of motivating a lot of this. I don't even know if it's on court stuff as much. Although when I show you the video and him getting extra defenders and him kicking out and then nothing happening off of that, I would get frustrated too after a couple games, especially if all of a sudden the fingers are pointing at me when I'm like, I just made the right pass every time. What can I do? What are you paying for? What's that?
No, I just started laughing because this is actually something I think about all the time. We have a generation of players who are aging out, who are on these last contracts, and like a Harden wants to be paid like a Harden 2010 for what he's already done.
Yeah.
And if I'm an organization, that's not the way I'm thinking. I want to pay you for what I project you to be worth right now or the next 2 or 3 years. So whether this is a PG, whether this is a Harden, Dame waited way too long to demand this trade. So we have a lot of players who we're discussing right now, and unfortunately, they're determining league movement, but they're at that last major contract or past that last major contract, and it's like, how do we determine your value? Like, what is? I have to throw the question right back at you.
Yeah,
what is hard work?
But it's even different because like Gabe Vincent's a good example. He signed for what, like $11 or $12 million a year. He was a starting guard on an NBA Finals team, and he earned that. He convinced me he could be a starting guard. I didn't think so when we started the whole playoffs, but you know what? He played well enough in that setting where he could do that. And what did he do? He was reliable. He could play under control. He could hit a three when he needed to. He could drive and dish a little bit and run your offense when you needed the offense to be run. Well, okay, James Harden did that well too. So what are you paying him? Like, what are you paying the max for? Well, it's probably like two things. It would be ISOs and crunch time, right? Like those are the two things where you'd be paying anybody more than Gabe Vincent money, because obviously what you can get for anybody for half that cost. You can get where you're, that kind of stuff. So that's what's interesting about it, because then you can look at Harden's ISOs, you can look at his crunch time, and then decide, okay, is he really worth it? That's the name of the actual video. No one don't steal that. I'll hopefully have it out by Wednesday. But that is really what it comes down to. It's like, yeah, is he worth it for those are the things you'd be paying a guy for? Otherwise, great. Find somebody else like the Gabe Vincents who can run your offense and make good decisions with the ball, and that's what you're going to pay for. So it is fascinating, and then we'll also see the NBA champions kind of run their offense the way they are, and proving that you could do that as well. In fact, you could prove that you could win 53 games in a stacked West, where it's probably going to. I made this comment in my pod where I would imagine, the skill level is getting so much better around the league, right? So you're going to finally have more and more guys to kick to who are going to be able to do something with the ball besides stand in the corner and maybe shoot an open three. So that in theory, the parity should increase, and you'll only be able to win the West with 53 wins, 52 wins, and the Nuggets did that, and they won the whole thing. They took a little time. I know they went 7-9 at the end because they rested a lot of their guys. So, okay, they would have won 56, 57 games, which is probably in par with normal. But still, the point being that I think it's going to be a lot harder to win a lot of those games. And I think the East will see that as well. So, anyway, so the point being is, how is that going to be? How are we going to play out with the values of these contracts at some point? Because we've established a baseline here and a market, but over enough time, that market probably will end up changing radically, especially with the new CBA, so that you can only have 2 stars. It's crazy. I've been talking for a long time. Sorry, but that is the interesting connection as far as with Harden is he's probably not worth the money he wants.
Yeah, and a question I got for you guys, sort of leading into winners and your winners and losers of free agency so far. Obviously, the Phoenix Suns, they're all in. Yeah. Talk about DeAndre Ayton is a fascinating one, because with Beal, Booker, KD, is DeAndre Ayton going to get enough touches to even justify earning what he's earning? He's not a defensive player, so he needs the ball offensively. With those 3 guys, he's not sniffing the ball really. And there's talk they're going to keep him now because they may not get comparable value. But in time, is the tax going to kill them? Where they're like, we just got to get rid of Ayton?
Probably because of the tax, but not because of the play. I think he's pretty good defensively, actually. I think he's improved on that level, and he's been able to be effective in the pick and roll and drops and stuff like that. He's got a nice shot. He should get plenty of opportunities in my mind because all those guys are going to be driving and drawing a lot of attention, and he should be getting little garbage stuff, little dump offs, dunks, little things here or there, maybe a quick dotted line jumpers, that kind of stuff. Like he's not going to get obviously very many post ups and by the way, they should let him have 5 or 6 a game. They're not. I don't think it's going to happen, but he should be able to get at least in double digits a game. I don't see any problem with him getting there. Now again, is that going to be enough for him? Again, if they're winning and they're winning at a 65 game pace, whatever they should, with all these stars, I would hope so, right? Like that should gloss over some things. And maybe the new coach, obviously the Monty Williams thing was a real problem, right? There was something going on, and I don't know, Monty might have been as shocked as anybody because I think he thinks he's always been great at communicating, and he has been. And so can Vogel get through? Now Vogel is, it's kind of like Ted Lasso, right? Yeah. And so, kind of. I mean, that's not the exact same energy as Ted Lasso, but he certainly has the language of Ted Lasso. And so that he might respond to that, and that actually might keep him, focused and team oriented more than he had been. So I think it could work. Oh, you just had me. I think you just talked me into the Suns, to buying long on the Suns here.
Yeah, they're one of my winners, EJ, and the Lakers. I want to hear both of your winners and losers, and then where do you think that this James Harden, Damian Lillard situation ends up?
Okay. Well, the Landale thing is a problem. I thought that he was coming on and giving him really good minutes for the Suns, and they lost him, right? And that's a big one. I think that they probably are going to regret at some point if they're looking for that production off the bench.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that one of the losers will be Philadelphia. I've been saying this for the last couple of shows that as much as we were concerned, they are the 2023 Brooklyn Nets, a team that that the clock is ticking. Mm-hmm. The players have made it known that they're unhappy for whatever reason. And one of the things that happens is that when star players make it known that they're unhappy in a situation or they're looking to move, it negates the trade market. It devalues what you can get to get something that's comparable. The fact that Coach Nick, you mentioned before, that this might actually be the impetus, not just for James Harden to leave, but it might expedite a Joel Embiid to leave. This might be the moment where we say the process is over. It was processed. So I think that's it's a really key moment where we can look at them being a loser. And then, as you mentioned, CT, the Raptors and losing Fred VanVleet. They're probably going to be in a situation where they're going to have to make some really tough decisions and start selling parts of their roster, because now who's your engine? Who's driving the car? So those would be my big two losers.
We have the answer for that, don't we? For Toronto? Because they signed Schroeder.
I just want to quickly add, though, Coach, just leading to EJ's point about Toronto, they're one of my biggest losers because OG Anunoby is an unrestricted free agent after this season, too. Yeah.
So watch for him to be on the trade block, I guess, right? Before they really lose him.
If they lost Fred for nothing, they're definitely not going to want to lose OG for nothing. And do they run that risk and tempt that? Where I think he's definitely got to be traded by the deadline.
Right. But it's tough because whoever's going to get him back has to know he's going to sign with them or not or whatever, or take that risk. That's going to be tough. But a good team needing something on the, a little jet, whatever.
And they paid Pirtle
in a short run.
They just paid Pirtle $20 million.
Yeah, that probably come back to haunt him. I also think that the Schroeder thing is interesting because he actually played very well for the Lakers. And I think what ultimately happens with him is I think there's a problem with him as a teammate. I think he is very negative. We see it like on the court in the way he reacts. Normally, you don't see that. Most of the guys are really kind of cool about it. Guy takes a bad shot, you're not really going to see the guy in the corner throw his arms up and be upset, but you'll see him do that. And I have to wonder if the Lakers certainly sense that we're like, we're not going to bring him back because they brought D'Lo back, right? And D'Lo was the one guy who I don't feel great about it. But he did prove very valuable, and he put up some really good numbers for them. I kind of had forgotten. I went back and looked, and it was like he really was a viable option for them. He just had a shot selection issue in the playoffs, and but there was a reason for that. Good defensive teams can goad the players they want into the shots that they want them to take, and he was more than willing to be that guy. It happened, and he went through it, and he lost minutes, and he lost his starting position. But D'Lo is still a very viable player who probably could still improve a little bit in the margins.
Yeah, and if on the other question, if the Heat do get Dame, yeah, you guys still got to tell me, where do you think he ends up, and does the Heat then become a contender? Where do you think this Harden Dame thing leads to?
Well, EJ, you want to go and take this one?
Oh boy. I think that we have to kind of figure out first who's the first domino to move. Is it going to be James Harden? Is it going to be Dame? Is it going to be related? Is it going to be that mega trade that CT hypothetically constructed? Do
you think, another question to mix it all in the pot, a Portland out of line just trading him anywhere to get value, or do you think they should do right by Dame?
Ooh. Well, they're not going to do right by Dame, right? They already kind of said that, I thought.
Yeah. And that's why I think like the whole to Miami piece, Dame waited too long to make his move. Dame waited, it was a move that needed to be made before, several years ago. I understand the relationship with the contract, but if you really want to, in Dame's situation, it was as if he wanted both the contract and the destination. Contract, destination, and championship aspirations. I think Dame probably doesn't end up in Miami because for what Portland wants, can Miami provide that? So I think that's really going to be the conclusion for Dame. Now, where is it? I don't know.
It'd be a steal.
Is it like, I don't know. I just don't foresee it being Miami.
Right. I think Dame was quoted, the camp was quoted as saying that they like Caleb Martin in Miami too. Like they would want him to still be there, right? And you need that. Yeah. But like, there's no way you make a deal because it would have to be Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, and here's the thing: they've already lost Strus, they've lost Gabe Vincent,
Love.
Who else?
Do they still have Love?
They still have Love. He was
right. Love would have to be the starter. So you'd have Duncan Jimmy,
Robinson,
Jim, Love, and could it be Martin? I don't know how they do that without giving up Martin, right? I mean, we know it's going to be Hero involved. By the way, they signed Thomas Bryant. No, who? Yeah, they signed Thomas Bryant. By the way, that was a huge thing for the Heat because they needed to upgrade Zeller, and that was huge. And he's a much better upgrade than Zeller, so that's a really good thing for them. Josh Richardson doesn't move the needle for me at all, but yeah, because they lost from that shooting and key role players, they need Caleb Martin. So I just don't see how it gets done, unless it's a 3-team trade.
Yeah, it's like, why are the Heat pieces always valued double, but Knicks pieces are like, we couldn't get a bag of Skittles for Obi or Quickly. It's crazy, like you said. But if Dame sounds like he's going to get real aggressive, like he's going to say, I'm not playing for Utah, I'm not playing for any of you. So this thing they're saying now could drag out weeks. This could get messy.
Do you see him say that, or because I can't picture him doing that? Like they trade him and he wouldn't show up. I really couldn't picture Dame being that guy. But is that what he's saying?
That we're hearing reports of that's how he's feeling. I don't think he's really come out forcefully to say that. But look at the stage he is at in his career. I don't think now that he's requested this trade, I don't think he's going to risk not being extra forceful and ending up in Utah. And he's got years to play on his contract. Yeah. So the Heat have to find more help. They have to find a 4th, 5th team, remove protections off a pick, include Duncan Robinson, maybe include Caleb Martin, like you said. there was talk they would even include Bam for the next superstar. I don't know if
Yeah,
they
that
would do
was
that for Dame. But
Yeah,
it just seems like Pat Riley always gets his guy, coach.
that's true. Yeah, and again, I would not be surprised if they pull it off. And at some point, maybe Portland realizes that the market isn't as strong as they think it would be for him. It's weird. The Warriors thing is more intriguing to me, although he wouldn't come off the bench either. But I mean, like CP3 should be coming off the bench and it'd be an easy thing, and maybe they're going to let him start and realize that, after a few games. But I just don't. I can't picture that. And again, the Milwaukee one is my favorite one for him, honestly. But no one's even considering that in a weird way. If I were Milwaukee, I'd be like, yeah, how about Drew and I don't know, Drew Portis and a pick. I don't know. Is that not enough?
that's the thing. I think one of the things that's really coloring, what is Dame. It goes back to what are these players worth at this point? Is what happened last season. I think Portland. There were some reports that Portland wanted packages similar to what Brooklyn was required to get in terms of the Kevin Durant trade, in terms of the Donovan Mitchell trades. That last year's market and what players were traded for. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. And so I think really Portland has to probably temper its expectations, because will they be able to procure multiple unprotected first round draft picks for a Dame at that contract? I don't know, unless they're going to say, Utah, here we come. OKC, I'm just throwing that out there. Here we come. Places that have multiple first round draft picks at their disposal.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It's you're right. This is all connected, right? They might not be completely connected in terms of Harden and Dame in the same trade, but there seems to be gravity and magnetics, quality to all of this, and maybe even a little bit of a showdown at high noon. Somebody waiting to draw, and yeah, it'll make it more intriguing, I suppose, and that's what they need. The ratings certainly, have to be a concern.
Yeah.
We talked about this in my pod as well. I know they were up from last year, but they had been going down, I think, a couple of years in a row. So up is not great unless it was way up, and it wasn't. So and then we even talked about, like, have you guys noticed, like, the commercials that you're seeing during the playoff games? Have you paid attention to that at all? Because I noticed that, and I'm not sure if it's as much as ESPN or TNT, but even the quality of commercial was not as high as you'd expect for marquee matchups, which means that the rates are lower, and that cheaper rates mean lower ratings, and that means less revenue to the NBA. So I'm sure they're doing okay, but it makes me worried a little bit when I see that kind of stuff. So. They need to figure out a way. I mean, listen, and we said this before. Again, I'm repeating myself from my pod, but you're not going to hold a mid-season tournament if everything is going amazingly, right? You're not experimenting like this, and that's happening, right? They're having a mid-season tournament next year.
Yep, it's coming.
Yeah. It's like you don't just willy-nilly announce out of the blue whenever right away the next year if your ratings are great. In my mind, my feeling.
Yeah,
that's big. So I'm sorry, CT. I just had to do something, but that's a huge point, especially when we're talking about television contracts, and we're talking about, like, the acceleration of player contracts. Mm-hmm. It seems as if you're asserting that there's a possibility that the contracts might, if the next television contracts aren't what we've assumed them to be when it comes to professional sports, that there might be like a readjustment of contracts, for player contracts.
And the CBA might have already been kind of factoring that in, because they have all the numbers. They know where this is all going. And we can't have quantitative easing where you could slowly, or you will have that where you can slowly see the $50 million players are going to be 40 and then 35. Because in reality, I mean, listen, if you're talking about just, it's monopoly money. It doesn't really, it's so much money and hundreds of millions of dollars, but at some point, it felt like it had been inflated since when KD signed with Golden State that summer, right? And there's this big explosion. And as a result, like we need to go back, but who's going to want to take less? That's the problem. Like, who's that first person who's going to realize, crap, there isn't anything left? We'll probably start seeing it with other guys, like if Russell Westbrook is a free agent. He's not, right? But like, you'll start seeing those kind of guys who are probably expect to get some decent money, like don't get any offers, right? Like they're not going to be able to play, and that kind of level. And then even the Dames. This is it. I think these contracts are going to start to expire, and we might end up seeing the 50s go to 40s and the 40s go to 30s.
Yeah,
and that might be okay to me. That's okay to me, I think.
Especially if there's kind of small examples like the Villanova guys have done, or the Heat guys did with Bosch, took less to, if you really want to make a sacrifice, it's to play with your friends or it's to go with that championship. But also wanted to make a point, gentlemen, about some markets have to overpay, like Indiana with Bruce Brown, $22 million to Pryor guy, or Portland. There's so many people that laughed at the Jeremiah Grant contract, $160 million. You got to consider too, those are markets where, it's not easy for them to draw talent. Toronto, they do have to overpay, and it's sometimes not as fair to look at their contracts with a team like LA or New York Knicks, where players might want to be there.
I asked Combo this question on my pod. Let me ask you this: do you think that there's a relationship between the, signing Grant and Dame requesting a trade? They happened one after the other.
Yeah, it was EJ.
I think that there might have been the expectation that Portland was thinking that they could convince Dame that they could do a quick soft reboot, a quick soft, like, we're just going to reposition some players, hope for really quick player development, and we'll be in championship contender mode within a year or two, and maybe we'll have some assets that we can move at some point. And one of the pieces that we need to make sure is that we have Jeremy Grant back in the fold. I think that Dame had his mindset that he wanted out of Portland, and maybe there was a lack of communication from his team, his camp, with the Portland front office, because otherwise, why all the machinations in terms of drafting who you did and then re-signing Jeremy Grant? Okay,
that makes sense. I probably agree. He had his mind made up already.
Yeah, I think it sort of started with Coach and EJ with the draft night. The third overall pick. If Dame was to get an upgrade that was going to satisfy him, they were going to have to use that third pick. And once they drafted Scoot, I think the writing was on the wall, and I think they were okay with knowing Dame was probably going to leave and giving Grant that money, because you got to reach the certain salary level, and if you've got Scoot, Shaden Sharp, and Anthony Simons, you want some veterans to be able to help them, I think, as well. Yeah, it's been a great conversation, Coach. Anything else you would want to just get out there as free agency continues? We might see a little bit of a lull with this trade being on ice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hope so. I need some time to catch up and get some videos out about all this stuff and how it all works.
In Summer League.
I was just thinking about this because, with Dame, they got to the conference finals, I think twice with him. And I think unexpectedly a couple of times. And one was like, I can't remember when they beat OKC with Paul George, that got him in the conference finals, maybe on a crazy shot. But like, that's what he does. Dame is a winner in that sense, right? Versus, someone like, Harden, who hasn't done that, right? Hasn't been able to do that for what a lot of reasons are, So that's the thing that separates Dame, but might make him more valuable. And he deserves to get on a team that can let him finally, unlock more of that, even though he's later on in his career. But other than that, yeah, I don't know. I think we got to keep our eyes on that. And yeah, I don't know if you're listening, Milwaukee, put together a package and see if you can get Dame.
Yeah, I like that. And I just want to get your thoughts on the Clippers. Like with Kawhi, are they coming to a sort of a fork in the road? Like, because you're out in LA and the Lakers are arming up. What are the Clippers going to do with their new arena? And do you really think this Paul George thing they retool? Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, the disappointment in my mind was they brought back Russ, and they only have to pay him. Wait, I'm looking at this thing right now. I'm not even sure how to read this.
Like 8, I think, or something like that. $8 million, I think.
But then the next, I see. I'm looking at, okay. So, which is cheap, which is good. And he might have been shocked that he couldn't believe that, 2 years out of making all he made, he's only going to be making under $8 million. But it just didn't work. I was going through footage the other day of Clippers. I was looking at something else. Maybe it was, no, it couldn't have been Harden because that was the East. It was something else. I was looking through a bunch of clips, but Russ kept popping up, and I was like, "Oh my goodness gracious!" It was like miss after turnover after miss in the playoffs. It was not good, and yet they brought him back, and so I worry about that. And I feel like we saw what happened when they traded him from the Lakers, right? Like I know they brought in other players too that changed some stuff, but I'm telling you, the him leaving had as much of an impact on them too. So that's going to be an issue. And then again, I don't think Kawhi is going to ever be Kawhi again. I think he's broken down, and I think Paul George struggles as well with that. And so, it was a gamble. It was probably worth gambling to bring those two guys in, and it didn't work. And I don't see it working. So it would probably behoove them at some point to figure out how to extricate them and get some more talent in. But it still requires, in my mind, some sort of a reboot. You know what I mean? I don't know if they can, with the age of Kawhi and Paul George, it would have to sort of be a reboot.
Yeah, EJ, with the regular season in the West, you need to win enough games to have a decent seeding to compete. And with those guys probably not even being able to play 60, 65, I think they're kind of shaking things up. I think the Knicks a real opportunity to swoop in to maybe try to get a Paul George, for a Barrett or a Quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
What would that deal be? You think it'd be either or it'd have to be both?
It'd probably be both, I would say. Yeah, because Quickly you're not sending out any starting Nick, and Barrett would obviously just be replaced by Paul George with a lengthier three.
Yeah, I like that, and then Brunson, Paul George, and then Randall, and then again, actually that takes care of a lot of the things. It makes Randall the third, which I can palate better. RJ Barrett's not there anymore, which I think was a thing that bothered me a little bit. And then whatever you get from PG is generally going to be awesome, if he can stay healthy. So that I like that deal. And again, remind me, is that was the whispers a couple weeks ago?
Yep.
Yeah, they were soft whispers about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering what would cause the Clippers to do it. That's the other question. There's, it didn't happen then, whatever, and they're ready to talk about it more. So the question now is like, what would have to happen that would get them to think, okay, let's get rid of Paul George. I don't know.
So
it's interesting.
What's scaring them is that Paul George is extension eligible, and he's going to want a $200 million re-up. So that's what's making him decide: do we break up Paul George now, knowing he wants the extension coming up? But I think the Knicks were hesitant, and maybe they might have backed away from what the LA Times reported, EJ, I think.
Yeah, no, that was the concern. Then there was some of the reports suggested that when you looked at the front office conversation, the front office chatter within the Knicks organization, they were divided as to whether or not it'd be an intelligent move to trade for Paul George, given the contract extension piece.
And then so in theory, like the summer league is good for that kind of stuff because you got guys walking by in the hallways and having discussions where they could get a sense of what Paul George really would expect for that extension. Would he expect the complete max? Could they work with him a little bit? Could that help us? Whatever. He's from LA. He likes LA. That's another part of this thing. He might not want to leave.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Dirty says, Balmer wants fresh new stars to maybe open up the arena. Coach. Great work. Keep it up. It's great to have a chat and enjoy the rest of the summer league, and let's see what this next season brings. There's going to be a lot of more shake-up to come.
For sure, love it. Always love to be on. Anytime you want me, I'll come chat and we'll talk more basketball.
Yep. Appreciate you. Coach. Have a great night. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Coach Nick, B-Ball Breakdown. As free agency day 4 continues, right? We didn't see any big moves. Malik Beasley to the Bucks, who seem to have done okay for themselves, keeping Brook Lopez and also keeping Chris Middleton. EJ, how do you think the Knicks are looking in the East with and your overall thoughts on the DiVincenzo pickup?
First off, big shout out to Coach Nick being really, really, really generous with his time. I mean, just having an opportunity to discuss so much of the league, that was really, really cool. And he's definitely a fan of the channel. He always helps us out, and just really, really intelligent, really learned individual with regards to players and understanding so many aspects of the game. So that was really cool. With regards to because you guys probably noticed we didn't talk that much in terms of the Knicks. Normally we're like deep dive into the Knicks. But that was a really great conversation because, what happens in the league has an impact on the Knicks. So with regards to the Knicks, we've been saying this for a few shows. What the Knicks did was really, they took a look at the landscape of the East and they determined that there were no significant moves that they could make that would launch them into to being a championship contender. And so, on the one hand, I've had some conversations with some people who were frustrated because the one or two moves. Well, that's largely what Leon Rose has proven himself to be as an administrator at this point, is that he's not going to he's not Isaiah Thomas. He's not Isaiah Thomas. He's not Donnie Walsh, because I don't know if you guys remember in 2009, in preparation for the free agent season, off season of 2010, Donnie Walsh made move after move after move to get contracts out of here. That's why, in part, we had Tracy McGrady for a little bit of a spell. That's us getting rid of Zebo. A number of different moves were made to try to optimize the amount of cap space that we had, or that we would have for 2010. That's not Leon Rose. Leon Rose is single, double, walk, lots of walks, intentional walks, the baseball metaphor here. And so for some Knicks fans, that's frustrating. That's disappointing. But I think that the Knicks looked at where the Eastern Conference is and said it might be better to save our assets for the next offseason. Do I agree with it? I don't know, because I haven't seen the entirety of their moves. Is there another move coming? We don't know. So it's really, I will say this and then I'll pass it off to you, CT. Did Miami get better? Is Toronto a better team right now than what they were this time last year? Is Brooklyn a better team than what they were this time last year? Is Charlotte a better team than what they were this time last year? Is Chicago a better team than what they were this time last year? I think it's not just a question of did the Knicks improve, it's also the question of what teams made a market improvement. I think the teams that we could say that really improved, Cleveland, if we're going to be objective. Indiana, definitely. We can't even say if Boston improved. Like, that's even a question mark. Because you're trading Marcus Smart for KP.
Yeah.
That's questionable. That's questionable. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, CT?
Yeah, I think the Grant Williams dominoes got to fall too. But yeah, I think with Boston, that's the shiny sort of addition with KP. People are thinking, oh, I know Stephen A suddenly thinks the world of KP. He was all over trashing him, but now he's with Boston. He's like, oh, he thinks they're the title contender, but that's Stephen A. But with Boston, I think their worry is point guard. They need like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and KP. They're not known for sharing the ball, passing the ball around. It was already like, you take your turn, I take my turn with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Now they lost the point guard. Well, they lost Brogdon, I think, as well, right?
I think Brogdon is still there.
Brogdon?
They still have Brogdon. The concern with regards to the initial trade was the health of Brogdon.
Correct. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So, with that said, I think, the Knicks are right there. But we need to talk about what's next. And you mentioned, is there another move coming? I feel like there is a very big possibility there's another move coming because for this reason. So the update now is the Knicks have 14 roster spots filled. They're at the required amount. So they don't need to make any other additions. But they're at the very level of the tax apron now. So they're unable to spend any more money to bring in that 15th guy. So if you do want, Torrey Craig, I think, is signed. But if you did want Kelly Oubre or you wanted another guy, the Knicks unfortunately can't sign a player with space now. It has to come via trade. And that's where things get real interesting now, EJ, because there is an opportunity to trade Fournier for a guy earning less salary so that they can clear up a little bit of money and make another signing. But with
Yeah.
the way the roster's constructed, there's not enough spots and there's not enough minutes to really go around for a guy that's a role player. I mean, like if you look at this roster on screen now, we've got Roby, who might be the backup four. There's Sims, there's RJ, and there's Hart. But I mentioned the OG Anunoby thing brewing in Toronto. He left Clutch 1 week ago, is now a CAA client and an unrestricted free agent coming up. Masai Ujiri is under immense pressure now, having lost Fred VanVleet for nothing. With OG Anunoby, he's supposedly been asking 3 first-round picks for him. He's going to have to come back to reality at some point, because who's going to trade all that boatload of stuff for a guy who's going to be unrestricted in 12 months from now? So that comes in where the Knicks can actually make a solid deal for OG now. Maybe they do want to send them RJ Barrett. Maybe they do want to send them quickly and some picks. I think that's something to really watch, and I'll get your thoughts. And then the other big thing is the Paul George thing. So I don't think the Knicks are possibly done. If there's a deal that they can do that they like, it'll be a trade and it'll be consolidation.
It has to be consolidation. It has to be consolidation, like you said, with the tax threshold, with the implications of the new CBA, with rotational minutes. I mean, we guys, we have to remember, last year we were somewhat fortunate. This past season, we were somewhat fortunate that many of the players that they suffered because of rotational minutes, or the lack of more rotational minutes. And to be more specific, they were professionals about it. Derrick Rose was a professional. He was a consummate professional when he pretty much lost playing time the first quarter of the season. Evan Fournier was an amazing professional because he went from starting to non-existent, and he was the consummate pro. You didn't hear him complain. You didn't hear him leak information to the press. Obi was a consummate pro for 3 seasons, where he didn't complain in the press. Every person who's discussed Obi and his tenure in New York City, they just kept on saying how much of a pro he was. He may not have been a star, but he was professional. That doesn't mean that every player you acquire will have that same level of maturity, that same level of professionalism. So if I were the front office, I'd be very judicious. I'd be very careful as to who I would trade for, because if you're just trading for a name, but have no clear plan as to how they're going to play or be part of the rotations, you're setting yourself up for a fractured locker room. You're setting your coach up for failure. Especially Coach Thibodeau, who's already a lightning rod. Some fans love him. A lot of fans don't like him. So unless you really want to undermine your coach, you have to be really strategic as to what this next move is. So I agree with you. It's definitely going to come from a trade. The who is the question. The who really is the question. And I agree with you with regards to Masai Ujiri. Masai Ujiri is almost in the same position that Danny Ainge was in this time last year, where Danny Ainge was like, this is what I want for Rudy Gobert, or rather, this is what I want for Donovan Mitchell. That's really the trade, where he was like adamant that he wanted 4 pieces. He wanted this, he wanted that, he wanted this. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. And I think that Masai Ujiri, like, for as much as he's received accolades and praise for the work that he's done previously, all of us have bouts of failure.
Yep.
And this might be it.
It's coming. Yeah, it's coming back to bite. I mean, I know Fred VanVleet sort of kind of past his prime, but that's a big blow to lose a player like that for nothing.
Oh, yeah.
I know it was a huge overpay for Houston, and congratulations to Fred VanVleet. I'm all about get the bag that you can get, and clearly maybe Toronto were like, hey, we're kind of in flux. We kind of are happy for you to leave. We don't want to give you that, but we messed up at the deadline, and that's where you can't afford to put a too high of a price tag on your guys. Leading back to Obi, reports that World Wide West wanted a couple of firsts for Obi, and that's why we weren't able to trade him, because he was so stuck in that sentimental relationship where Obi's a Knick, let's keep him in New York, rather than manage that asset correctly. Now we end up with 2 second round picks to show for it, and that's all. Now, if they don't make a move with OG, they need to make that decision. And now they're reverse pivoting and going to give money to Gary Trent Jr.
Yeah.
Talk about going maybe even backwards, not even sideways. That's going backwards. You replace Fred VanVleet with Dennis Schroeder, and now you were dangling Gary Trent all season, last season, with a huge price tag, and now you're suddenly invested in him, going to give him money. Like, he's all over the place, man, EJ.
It's timing.
But the question I want to ask you is it a coincidence that we were talking about with Mark Berman, all the Clutch, Rich Paul, CAA beef, literally days after that storm, we heard that OG Anunoby parts with Clutch, right?
Yeah.
Not only that, but within less than, I don't know, 36 hours, 24 hours, I don't know, whatever it was, boof, this CAA post comes up on Twitter that OG Anunoby is our new acquisition. Like, is that a coincidence that how close those were connected? Like, is there smoke there, in your honest opinion?
I think there's some smoke. I don't know if it's a fire. The only reason why I say that is because we're also dealing with Masai Ujiri. And we're dealing with Masai Ujiri and the New York Knicks. Masai Ujiri and the New York Knicks have a long history. I don't know what trumps the political dynamics in that kind of business dealings. Is it the agencies? Is it Clutch? Is it CAA and the connections and the agents that will have more political leverage? Or would it be Masai Ujiri who sits there and says, I don't care if it's Clutch, I don't care if it's CAA, I don't care if we go back in a time machine and it's David Falk, I don't care if it's your mother, I don't care if it's your grandmother, I don't care if it's your baby girlfriend, I don't care who it is. I want what I want, and I'm not moving him until I get what I want. Now, I'm not saying that's a smart move, but I think that's part of what's happening now is that I don't know who really has more power. Is it the agencies or is it the front offices? And it might be a different answer based upon the actual team and the organization. So I think there's a relationship between the CAA signing, but I don't know if that will move the needle or really incite Masai Ujiri to feel this need to trade with the Knicks and to get OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks. Again, Masai Ujiri is responsible for the Carmelo trade. Masai Ujiri, if memory serves me correctly, and I'm pretty sure I remember this correctly, he's responsible for the Andrea Bargnani trade.
Oh man, the Melo trade with Denver.
Yeah, the Melo trade.
Well. Yeah. Also, he is I think Messiah was CAA connected, or still might be CAA, which led Dolan to do a lot of dealings with him. So, but I believe, I agree with you. I believe there is serious smoke. I think CAA is definitely a big agency, so any player might want to sign with them. But the fact is, he's becoming an unrestricted free agent, and he's decided to make this agency change right now. Tells me it's worth watching. Whatever's going on in Toronto is worth watching, right?
Definitely.
They could sell their fan base on a Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett homecoming with if the Knicks did need to throw in picks and etc. Or Dennis Schroeder could be a nice backup. Emmanuel Quickley could be the guard for the future for them. But
you could sell me an OG.
Yeah, another big thing is Tom Thibodeau. I've heard reports for years now. He's the kind of guy that Tom Thibodeau would be like, Leon, get me that guy. Like, he's versatile, 3 and the 4, rebounds, shoots, drives, does everything Tom Thibodeau wants in a power forward. He's the anti-Obi in Tom Thibodeau's world. As is Paul George too. So we could strike while the iron is hot. 2 desperate teams. Maybe that's what helps us out. Let's hope. The Clippers are desperate, fam. What do you see they do with the Clippers thing? Do you think they try to get in on the Harden thing and keep Paul George? three guys that are very, very old,
It's what I was saying before. I think that we're in the middle of a generation shift where we're seeing players like Harden, we're seeing players like Russell Westbrook, we're seeing players like a Paul George. Guys, let's remember how long Paul George has been in the league. Paul George has been in the league
Man.
for a while. He's been in the league for a while.
Pacer PG was a beast.
Pacer PG was another level. And I think that sometimes we forget that. And the reason why, like, if you were to ask me if I had to choose between PG and OG, PG's a really great player, but give me OG all day. And it's not just an age thing. It's like there's a considerable gap in age. And but I think the other reason why I mentioned the generational shift is because I really think certain organizations are getting ready for this new CBA and understanding they
Yes.
don't want to be locked in to certain players whose value in the league is depreciating rapidly. Coach Nick said this before. There's a reason why there's so much conversation with regards to PG and not Kawhi. How much trade value would Kawhi have today?
Man, Kawhi has more value to the team he's on because other teams
Exactly.
aren't giving up much. It's
Exactly.
kind of like Kyrie and Dallas. It's like,
Exactly.
hey man, I would love to maybe get with them over there, but I'm with you and we're stuck with each other.
Exactly.
Or let that contract play out at least. They could sell their fans on the new arena and stuff. That arena that has more toilets than any other arena.
But that's the Clipper dilemma, is that I think that they're not going to say it explicitly, but the reason why we're probably going to hear a lot about PG is because there's more trade value there. And as they position themselves to deal with this new CBA, I really foresee a league where, and I was really hoping that we had time to ask Coach Nick this. I think the 3 superstar model, it's dead. Like the super team, that super 3 max level contract, it's gone. And so what Miami proved is you need flexible pieces. You need pieces that are that they're valuable, that they aren't committed to too many crazy contracts. I mean, another team I think that's really suffering in the same position is Minnesota. I think the reason why we hear so much about Cat, Anthony Edwards just signed a $250 million contract extension. So you have Anthony Edwards' contract, you have Cat's contract, you have Rudy Gobert's contract. I haven't been to Minnesota, but that's a lot of money for new ownership to be doling out in contracts. So Cat is going to be a piece that at some point, because he has more value as a tradable commodity than a Rudy Gobert, in preparation for this new CBA, he has to move as well too.
That's one of the reasons Clippers would entertain PG. But the biggest reason I'll, confirm for everyone, if you don't already know, is that Paul George is repped by Aaron Mintz, who is also Julius Randle's agent. So Paul George is CAA, right? And I'll tell you why I think Paul George is the most likely one to be a New York Knick, is because what are the Clippers worried about? This 2-year impending re-up extension with Paul George, whatever it's going to be, 200 milli. And what does CAA want to do for their clients? They want to get them paid.
Yeah,
right?
man.
And what are Knicks very good at? Making sure players get paid.
Yeah.
So it could be a win-win-win for everybody, where the Clippers get off of Paul George. They avoid that re-up that they don't want to do with an aging Kawhi. They get some young pieces from the Knicks. The Knicks get their veteran that can help them now. And CAA make sure the client gets paid, and Julius Randle gets another buddy.
Yeah.
On the team. There's just too many connections.
Here's just the one question I would ask you. Would the front office, especially after the year that Jalen Brunson had last year, would your motivation be to get Julius Randle a buddy, or to get Jalen Brunson a buddy? You get what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
do you make moves on behalf of Julius Randle, or do you make moves more on behalf? Because if it's me, because I understand exactly what you're saying. If it's
Yeah.
me, every move I make, I'm calling up Jalen Brunson and I'm like, hey, JB, what are your thoughts here? And if Julius finds out, I'm like, we were gonna tell you. We did, we had to go through
Yeah.
the channels. But to me, I'm making moves primarily to make Jalen Brunson happy. That's just me.
100%. No, I think most fans will agree with you. But here is where I think Brunson could be on board with it also, is
Hmm.
because his window, right? We got a 2-year window with Brunson needing to be re-upped himself. So that
Yes.
already lets us
Yes.
know now. Now we've established this timeline where before that contract needs to be re-upped with Jalen Brunson, we know the Knicks are going to bring in the next star, whoever they're going to put all their
Hmm.
assets in for, is going to be in the door in the next 2 years, whether it's Embiid, Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, OG Anunoby. It's
Yeah.
going to happen in these next 2 years. So, people that are upset, why aren't we making the move? It's coming. It's
Yeah.
coming.
No,
They
it's
know
definitely
it's
coming.
coming.
It's
This
definitely coming.
salary, once we're paying Jalen Brunson 200 milli, it's a wrap. We need to have who we need to have. And so, exactly like you said, I think Brunson, while he's still under 30 and on this cheaper contract, we could bring in PG for the 2 years, maybe even lie to him and say we're going to re-up him and see what it looks like for a year, and then maybe sell him. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could, yeah, just I don't know, shake things up. I just think it suits both sides, fam. I think the Knicks need their next marketable, veteran star, and then the Clippers, like, yeah,
They need
I
to
just
reset.
think they need better regular season guys, because
Yeah.
the playoffs are important. I 100% agree with you on that. But the Clippers have no shot in the playoffs if they're finishing in the 7th seed.
Agreed.
If Paul George is playing 55 games and Kawhi is playing 60 games in the West, the Clippers aren't finishing anywhere near the sixth or maybe the 6th or 7th seed.
I totally agree with everything you're saying. I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I think at this point, the most realistic big moves the Knicks could make would be PG or OG Anunoby. Um, and this is the thing I've been saying like for a while. Every move comes with potential pitfalls. Every move comes with potential pitfalls. The PG pitfall is, will he be available for the amount of time that we need him to be available for a significant playoff run? But at the same time, PG offers something, a talent set that we haven't had here conceivably since Carmelo Anthony. PG on the court with a Jalen Brunson and a Julius Randle taking on a Miami, we might be having a different conversation. Um, I think that's important to understand. The issue, like we've said, is that contract extension conversation. And also the other piece that we have to remember is that if a PG arrives to the New York Knicks, this would be, I believe, his 4th or 5th team. Something happens to the value of NBA contracts once a player has been moved after the 3rd or 4th time. You're stuck with that contract until the end of the contract. So there is no moving PG again for a value for a contract that's going to accrue in value. No, it's only going to depreciate even more. Whereas an
100%.
OG Anunoby, who would be moved for the first time, that's a contract that's not only in keeping with the timeline, the age timeline of players that's already on your squad. That's a contract that could actually increase in value. And so could be hypothetically moved again for player X. Let's say, I'm just throwing this out here, I'm not saying this is possible, but let's say an OG Anunoby could be moved in 2025 for Giannis. PG's not being moved for Giannis. Like, that's not, Milwaukee would look at you and say, like, really? No.
Yeah.
kind of like to DeCoulis's point, like a Mikal Bridges, who was just traded for the first time. That's a piece that any team, if they're looking at trading for a Dame, if they're looking for trading a whatever star, that's the first place you're going. It's like, can we get Mikal Bridges? You could conceive of a world where that's an OG Anunoby, whereas Paul George, that's not happening. Teams are going to overlook and say, please.
Yeah. And these very movable parts with Josh Hart, DiVincenzo are the perfect pieces you're going to need for that blockbuster to make more salary. Now, the worry is, Evan Fournier was basically a sunken cost after year one or immediately. But if we ink Josh Hart to a 4-year, $80 million deal and, the DiVincenzo deal, they're movable. Their play's not going to fall off a cliff where other teams going to be like, no, we're not taking them. So the Knicks aren't really moving forward yet in a big direction, but we are signing pieces that are movable as well, which are big.
And it's also, it's not going to be sexy too. Like, it's not going to, when you're making like modest, smart signings that are reasonable in terms of contract and movable, they're not going to be like, they're not going to blow up Twitter.
Yeah.
Then again, it doesn't take a lot to blow up Twitter now because it doesn't work most of the time, but that's a story for another day.
No, I do mean it when I said to you and Coach about Tibbs and we're narrowing a player window with Tibbs here because, there's a Tibbs certain guy, there's a relationship, he can, put you in the doghouse real quick. So we are seeming to doubling down on guys that Tom Thibodeau guys, which, whether you agree or you don't agree, at least they're players that are going to play, and we're not going to, have to sit them on the bench and lose all the value. So that's another thing. I also wanted to make this point, EJ, about the Knicks' development or lack of development of young rookies. And first, we've had 2 drafts now with no picks, and there's been a lot of talk and people voicing their opinion on that. I agree it's disappointing. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't want the Knicks to draft young talent. I definitely do. And there's been some players that they missed out on, 100%. The other thing I would want to point out is that the Knicks have guys still on their rookie contracts that people are forgetting about that are playing in the rotation. So Deuce McBride and Jericho Sims are players that are in the Knicks rotation, are playing and are still on rookie contracts. So I think the Knicks front office...
Q dot.
Yeah, and Q dot. So I think the Knicks front office is thinking, like, we are getting closer to wanting to win now and go all in. So does it make a whole lot of sense for us to, to use some of these picks or salary up for guys that aren't going to play? While we still have a Deuce McBride, Jericho Sims, Emmanuel Quickley on his second contract coming up, and Quentin Grimes. But what we did is we kind of tried to tread the line. We got a Jalen Martin and a Jacob Toppin as well. We have an Isaiah Roby who's still pretty young also. So with the Summer League roster now was released today, EJ, chat, Jacob Toppin unfortunately is out, was an omission due to a minor injury, they're saying. But we get an opportunity to see a guy that many Knicks fans don't know much about, which is Isaiah Roby, a very, very promising player. I urge you to check out his highlights because there's a reason the Knicks locked him up on guaranteed money, guaranteed roster spot ASAP when he became available. He got talent. Like, he has talent. He can stroke it. And he could be a very, very capable replacement for Obi. He might not be, but he could be. I urge you to check his highlights out. And again, he was pretty sought after. The Knicks gave guaranteed money straight away. But we're going to see Jalen Martin, we're going to see Trevor Keels, and we're going to see Jeffries. What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is an underrated aspect of being a fan is, especially during free agency, sometimes the biggest free agent you can get is player development within. So that, for example, that wing or that extra scoring or, getting an additional 4 to 5 points might just come in the form of a player developing into a more consistent shot. So, for example, the player that I have my eyes on is Quentin Grimes. I mean, I think that with all due respect, that's a player that if he grows and if he's able to hit shots more consistently and is able to average and take a leap this season, this being his third season, I believe, if he's able to score 4 or 5 points, 6 more points, that's a major, it's not an acquisition in a traditional sense, as in like drafting a player or trading for a player, but it's an acquisition and increased talent. And so that's an underappreciated element of fandom, where if you can further develop, whether it's part of the organizational process of developing players, or even like a player figuring something out, having a conversation, having someone who mentors you to unlock different elements of your game that maybe physically you weren't able to see before. That's an important part of the game. Additionally, here's the other thing too. I will never forget this conversation we had with Rafael Barlow. He reminded us in that conversation we had with him that these are players that if you've been a fan of basketball for 20, 30 years, these are players who appreciably are younger when they first arrive into the league than what they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's something about getting your body as a man when you're 22, 23, 25, where all of a sudden you're able to bully and play more physically than what you were when you first arrived into the league. And then the other part of it too, and this is me, like, in my daytime job, understanding this, where players are psychologically, emotionally, and in terms of their maturation at 19, 20, and their ability to proceed with wisdom, it's not where it is by the time you get to like you're 25, 26. Just developmentally speaking, how your brain works and how you can make smarter decisions, especially in quicker bursts. It just happens. So, it's really quickly just to end this point. It's why every NBA player who was a knucklehead in the league, almost every player who was a knucklehead in the league, when they're out of the league, all of a sudden they all have like this come to Jesus moment. They were like, you know what? I was really immature back then. Well, because your brain developed finally.
Yeah. You need some good veterans for sure, man.
Yeah.
But with this NIL money, I think it's good for players to stay in college that extra year, Like, what's the point? Like, if we could talk to Kevin Knox again, he was 18. Frank Ntilikina was 18. If we could
Yeah.
talk to them now and say, hey, just work on your game a little bit more, man. What's the point in getting, I know your aim is to try to get drafted as high as possible, and get that bag. But if that means ruining your career and you being on the end of a bench because your body and your game's not up to NBA level yet,
Yeah.
then like, why not stay and continue to work on your craft, we have Obi, who's 24, 20, 25 now. Isaiah Roby's an older guy. Some of these guys don't pop till later as well. How many years did Andrew Wiggins have to be in the league?
Yes. That's a great example.
Another good name, Markel Fultz, was very
Yeah.
raw 18, was crazy talented in college, was the college player of the year, was
Yeah.
consensus number one, but he was so young.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and again, like it has to, all elements of the game, and we've talked about this a number of times, all aspects of the game have to come together. Your, not just your physical strength, but your
Yep.
emotional resolve. Because like, think about what we said about, part of our critique continually of Julius is that there tends to be, it's not physical inconsistency, it's often emotional inconsistency. And this is not an indictment, but there's a relationship between the emotional maturity plus the physical maturity. Sometimes we've talked about RJ and his mental acuity, making smart plays. Sometimes you just have to keep on being hit over the head over and over again for you to finally realize, maybe I need to work more on my right hand game. Like, that's part of it. So it's not just the physicality. It's not about how high you can jump. And this is why, like, and again, like, if you didn't see it, please go back to our show with Rafael Barlow, where he talked about how difficult it is for NBA executives to figure out how to evaluate college players players in the G League, players overseas, because like he went and he gave a master dissertation on how just because a player is an overseas player, there are so many different leagues overseas. And for many of us as Americans, when we say overseas, it's like we just picture one huge swath. It's like, players are playing in Russia and Ukraine and playing in Latvia and Lithuania. It's all the same. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. So this is why players are going to develop at different rates and in different ways, because the league is so global now, but it makes it more difficult to evaluate talent and to be patient with talent.
Yeah, 100%. Coaching is a big thing as well. Like in terms of it, it didn't help Kevin Knox with Fizdale, Hornacek and whoever, and Derek Fisher with Frank Ntilikina, and the direction. Or also, now I'm not saying necessarily those players, were going to develop, but they weren't given as much opportunity as they could have for such high draft picks. We've talked about the Knicks doing well now with the later first round picks, but we've struggled with top 10 picks, top 11 picks.
Yeah.
Nick Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, these guys, Obi, missing out on so many talented guys. Or should you draft with a higher floor? We really did reach with Kevin Knox because
oh my gosh, we reached.
He killed the workouts. He bullied Miles Bridges apparently.
Yeah.
I would love to be a fly on the wall. Maybe it was Phil Jackson didn't rub his glasses, and it was actually Miles Bridges giving Kevin Knox the work. And that he only saw two blurry silhouettes and thought.
You're also talking about the same person who gave Joakim Noah an outlandish contract. But I think that part of what's happening is in the league is if you're going to bail on a player, you might have to bail earlier on certain players. And I think that's the lesson with Obi is that as soon as Julius Randle had that season, you either had to make a move and move Julius Randle at the height of his breakout season, or you had to move Obi because Obi wasn't. But there's no part of what makes certain players attractive is the unknown. And Obi at that point, his first year, was an unknown commodity. So you can sell to other teams in the league the unknown. But once we got to year 2, year 3, particularly year 3, you had a depressed asset. And the reason why is because whomever in the front office decided that they had this vision of, I can foresee Obi getting more time. And they didn't deal in the world of reality where Coach Thibodeau had made it abundantly clear he was not going to give Obi more time. We only need Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C. Derrick Rose, in an interview, who's Coach Thibodeau's favorite player? Derrick Rose's response? Not Obi.
Not Obi. Yep. That was so funny.
Yeah.
I remember watching it at the time, and because Obi was still a Knick, you kind of just brush that off, and you're like, oh, who cares? Obi's a big draft pick. He's gonna have to play. But I appreciate the chat, Bodega. My apologies to Phil Jackson. I was incorrect. It was Steve Mills and Fizdale.
Steve Mills, yeah.
That selected Kevin Knox. Actually, Phil's drafting, you could say, he chose Porzingis, who, let's say he never got that ACL injury, could have had a better career than Karl Anthony Towns. Or, for the 4th pick, he did the best that he could. In fact, Phil wanted to trade KP for Jaylen Brown or Devin Booker.
Oh my gosh.
How different we would have been if Dolan had let Phil Jackson trade KP ASAP and before he became too disgruntled.
Yeah, that's there has to be a 30 for 30. Actually, you know what? We have to have a conversation with Berman, and it has to be about the draft, the moves that weren't.
Wow.
The moves, the moves that weren't, like the moves that there was someone in the front office who wanted to make it, or it was the T's were crossed, but the I's weren't dotted, and it could have been like we all know like the Steph Curry one, but like that Porzingis one where it could have been a Devin Booker or a Jaylen Brown. I mean, it's an alternate universe where if it changes the trajectory of the organization, because if we have a Devin Booker, there are a lot of there would be a lot of things that we would not have to have suffered through. Like if a Devin Booker changes so many parameters, it changes how we draft. Yeah. I mean, I was really excited for tonight's show. That alternate universe of question just depressed me.
Yeah, facts, right? And apologies to Luke, we missed the super chat earlier. Let's get to that, and also Buzz's super chat. Appreciate you guys always rocking out. Got the streets buzzing. Luke says Nick's about to drop a 50 burger on the league, even with this squad. Believe that. I believe that. I think we are better. I think people are going to look at, did DiVincenzo push us higher, EJ, or did Obi maybe make us worse? I think continuity is the main reason the Knicks are going to be good again, because we've barely moved any pieces. Quickly is going to most likely be here if we don't make an upgrade. I think RJ is going to be better. Quentin Grimes is going to be his third year breakout.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the rest of the East is going to get better, but I think 50 wins is a very realistic target with with health.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I think that 50 is really realistic when you consider who the coach is. Coach Thibodeau does not like losing and giving away games. So I think that's really imaginable. And plus, I think 50 is realistic because if Buzzer Beater is really being honest and saying that they're 99 years old tomorrow, I mean, 50 has to definitely be something to at least make Buzzer happy, before we get to 100, an entire century.
Yep. Hold on for one more day, fam.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
We'll get it.
Happy,
man.
happy July 4th.
It's going to be the biggest parade ever,
Oh my gosh. I will listen. If the Knicks win the championship, I promise to go down to the Canyon of Heroes because I know exactly where they would be holding the parade. I would we would do a live stream, and I would be there. I would be there reporting live.
Facts. Like, help me out, guys, in the US in terms of the US sports. What would be the biggest so far you've seen in terms of maybe the Cubs? Was it the Astros? I actually saw a Denver Nuggets fan tweet on one of these national tweets, Embiid coming to the Knicks. And he actually said, look, now that the Nuggets have won, my Nuggets, I really want the Knicks to break their drought. So that was coming from a Nuggets fan.
What would be comparable? Well, at least in New York City, there are actually a few comps in New York City in terms of.
And would a Jets parade?
Yeah, that's the one I was going to go to. Yeah. So in New York City, there are a lot of comps in New York City. The first one you have to go to is 1994, the New York Rangers. The Rangers hadn't won the cup in a long time. I think the year is 19. Someone in the chat, please look it up really quickly. I want to say 1904, but I know that's off. So the Rangers were definitely a comp, and the Rangers are still a comp because they haven't won a cup since '94. The Jets would be enormous in terms of a comp. The Jets, you're talking about the 1960s.
Wow.
Talking about Joe Namath. I mean, so there are people who are walking this earth who've not seen the Jets really be in championship contender status. There was a brief run in the 90s with Vinny Testaverde, a little bit with Rex Ryan, but that would be huge. The other one, too, would be the New York Mets. The Nets have not won a championship since 1986. Mets, and what's really bad, CT, in New York, many Jets fans are actually Mets fans as well. So you're not only suffering in baseball, you're suffering in terms of your football. Yeah. And so there are quite a few comps in terms of teams that, their players would probably lead to a riot. and a number of them are located in New York City.
Well, if the Knicks are shutting down streets after playoff victories, then I can only imagine. Can you imagine if Twitter was around in '94
Oh my
when
gosh.
Starks brought us back in Game 6, but then had his shot tipped by Akeem Olajuwon, and then the vitriol when Pat the Rat Riley faxed in his resignation to join Mickey Arison and the Heat.
Dude,
Man, Twitter would have been broke. Talk about the other
Twitty
day.
would have. Well, first off, that entire stretch of time, Twitter would have been broken because that's the same time the Rangers were making their run, and they won the cup,
Yeah.
and then
And then the OJ chase at the
OJ,
same time.
that would have broken because
Yeah.
there's a great video of the night of the OJ chase. A number of fans leaving their seats during the
Yeah.
game to go watch the OJ chase. So between OJ, the Rangers, and because the Rangers parade was actually that morning, and like Mark Messier and Keenan, Coach Keenan, Mike Keenan at the time saying, and now
Yeah.
we're waiting for the other part of the Garden to win the championship. Twitter would have gone crazy.
Bodegas says Mets won in the 80s. They even made a rap song.
86, yeah.
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 Yeah. But yeah, New York sports.
I think the Knicks championship would be the one to really explode New York, followed by the Jets, and then followed by the Mets.
Yeah. Hopefully it's while these legends are still here, from 73 and that,
Yeah.
Please help out of all the other people, help them, let them see another championship.
Especially Clyde. Clyde deserves it. Joe Namath deserves it. They deserve to see their teams win championships.
Clyde is such a good guy and got so much time for fans, but I think he would be the first guy that would be like, please, just someone else win. I mean, he gets stopped wherever he goes, asking for a fan to have a glimmer of that ring.
Yeah, yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, but we'll get there, fam. Yeah, to Buzzer's other question, real quick, about how much money do we have now? Yeah, so the Knicks can spend the biannual exception, which is 4.5 milli, if they like, fam. But like I said, the reason they traded Obi, another big reason they traded Obi for no salary, is because they've already decided they want to stay below the tax apron, and spending the 4.5 biannual exception would put them over. So it's very, very unlikely we make that signing or any other signing, fam. It's like we said before, it's a trade to bring in other players of equal salary. And by the way, the Paul George, the OG Anunoby trades can be made with RJ Barrett and Quickly's money and Fournier's to make it perfect, so that the Knicks can stay below. The other option is, like we said, which is unlikely. They could trade Evan Fournier for, let's say, like people have said, Doug McDermott from the San Antonio Spurs, who's also another expiring salary, which is $6 million less than his. So that would give the Knicks more money this season to spend. But looking at the rotation, EJ, and just bring it up on screen again, do you see that happening? Like, just to spend the biannual and bring in a Kelly Oubre kind of thing? I think the Knicks are looking bigger.
I think the Knicks are looking bigger too. I think Kelly Oubre is a name that has been linked to the Knicks for several years. So it's a reoccurring story. But I think, especially when you're looking at limited roster spots, limited roster rotational minutes, and the financial implications of it, if you can get 3 players for one, or rather, if you can trade 3 players for one, there are financial implications for it. And we don't, we have to look, I forget someone in the chat said this, we have to look forward. Some of these moves are not just made with this season in mind, they're made with several seasons in mind. So Its financial implications not just for 2023, 2024, it's for 2024 beyond. So, and because again, CT keeps on saying this, and I agree wholeheartedly, we have to keep an eye out on Donovan Mitchell and what's taking place in Cleveland.
Yeah. Also, just to confirm, they could also swap the players. They could, let's say they don't want to give a roster spot to Daquan Jeffries or Trevor Keels. They could swap those players for a player of the same salary, but they're earning minimum. They've got to make a call on Dwayne Washington, Keels. They've got to cut one of those two, assuming they give Toppin and Jalen Martin a two-way. You can now have 3 two-ways. So with Washington, Keels, Martin, and Toppin, they've got to cut one of them, assuming they keep Daquan Jeffries and Isaiah Roby on a roster spot. Now, I could easily see them waiving those two and maybe bringing in another minimum guy, Taj Gibson, Ryan Archie Diokono from Villanova. Yeah, I could see them doing that also. But yeah, most likely, like Sharp Power says, follow the money, which is a trade now to get better, get OG. But our rotation's pretty set, fam. I think 50 wins should be the target. And I'm going to be interested to see, EJ, when the Vegas over and under comes out. Is that usually when the schedule is released?
Yeah. Because you have to figure out, there are always organizations and websites that make their predictions in terms of, power rankings, but you can't really do it until you have the roster. You have the schedule that comes out.
Yeah, and give me your before we get out of here, give me your over under right now. Like, what would you set it at?
I think that I forget who said this before. I think it might have been Buzzer. I think that we are looking at around, all things considered, about 49 wins.
Yep, 49. Wow, if Vegas sets at that, I think they're really buying into the Knicks. The Knicks being good. Which is going to be interesting. But yeah, we gave our thoughts. I feel like Paul George, OG Anunoby are the dudes to look out for if we can get involved in a Harden trade, three-way trade with Lillard, etc. It was great to have Coach Nick on, EJ, the one, the only, the chat. This off-season continues to buzz. Day 5 tomorrow. I think, in terms of the Knicks moves, we'll start to hear maybe more rumors. But Summer League is bumping at the moment. Jacob Toppin's out, but Keels, Isaiah Roby, Daquan Jeffries, Jalen Martin, some guys worth watching, EJ. 4 of them could be on the roster in some way. So
yes, sir.
Let's see, keep our eyes out on that. And I appreciate everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, keep the buzz, and go New York, go. Peace.